Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, February the 25th, 2025. Today there is a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, and I regard this conjunction as a fairly big deal, and this conjunction is something I want to focus on in this video and consider its likely impact, and also consider a few famous people who might be influenced by it. But before I look at the Mercury-Saturn conjunction in detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, February the 25th. So let's start off by considering the astrology of today. So here is a chart for today, set for noon, and you can see that Tuesday, noon, February the 25th, we see the moon at 6 degrees Aquarius. So really it is a moon in Aquarius day, and in fact the moon moves into Aquarius London time at sort of 5:40 a.m, which would be 6:40 a.m. if you're in Paris or Berlin or Rome. So that's pretty early in the morning. So if you're in Europe, America, Africa, it really is all about the moon in Aquarius. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon won't move into Aquarius until this afternoon, or maybe even the early evening. So there is a bit of a difference there, but I think we can be fairly safe in saying that, broadly speaking, it is a day when the moon is in Aquarius. And the moon, when it moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. And so moon conjunct Pluto, it is a reminder that Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto's been in Aquarius now for a few months, and so the moon in Aquarius really sort of emphasizes that. And we could see the moon in moon conjunct Pluto as being quite independent-minded. We like to do things our own way, and if anyone infringes on our independence, we could get annoyed. But this moon Pluto conjunction, it's in air signs, so we don't really associate the air signs as being serious, overt irritation. It's more perhaps about what we say and what we don't say, what we're thinking, and maybe the power of our thoughts. And then the moon moves on to make a sextile with Venus. That moon sextile Venus, it's quite a gentle aspect. It's beneficial for relationships, but it's not an emotional sextile. I mean, I know that the moon and Venus are feminine planets, often connected with relationships, often connected with emotions, but moon's in Aquarius, Venus is in Aries. It can be sociable, it can be quite fun, and it's nice to have Venus in Aries, fire sign. That's got plenty of get up and go. Then you've got moon in Aquarius, that's about ideas. So ideally, relationships should be at the level of ideas and action, and maybe we shouldn't be so concerned about the deeper emotions. And as far as the main aspect is concerned, now the main aspect, this is something I will be talking about in detail later in the video, but Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn, and this Mercury's conjunction of Saturn could be good, could be bad. I mean, it's problematic in terms of our perceptions. I think with this Mercury conjunct Saturn, it's probably quite a good idea to see it on a cognitive level. How do we perceive the information coming our way? And so neutral information with Mercury conjunct Saturn can be interpreted in the worst possible light. And this might be reflected in the markets. Again, not making any predictions about the markets, but recently the markets have been a bit shaky. I was looking at what the markets were doing this morning. I'm actually, of course, making this video on a Monday morning Pacific time. So Monday morning, the markets didn't start off particularly well, as far as I could see. And that might be about Mercury conjunct Saturn. People seeing economic news, oh, it's bad. Inflation news, it's bad. It's going to have a really bad impact. And so that can be one way in which Mercury-Saturn conjunction can work. It can also be about just how we perceive our own circumstances. There may be nothing wrong with our circumstances, but with Mercury conjunct Saturn, we might be tempted to think negatively about it. So that is the broad theme of that aspect. And there's one thing about this Mercury-Saturn conjunction which I should say, and it is this. It is, if you look at this chart, and this is a chart for today, and if you look at this chart, have a look at Mars and Uranus. You see, there's Mars, there's Uranus, and so Uranus is in Taurus, Mars is in Cancer. And so the midpoint of Mars and Uranus is approximately 20 Gemini. I mean, you can see that by eye. Now, that Mercury-Saturn conjunction is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And that might actually make it into quite a stressful day. Maybe not for us as individuals, but for the world in general. There's a lot of tension. It's starting to manifest. Mars-Uranus is about explosions. It's about things just going wrong. Things can be very unstable. And so there may be a sense of shock here, and we don't really know how to respond to ongoing events. Again, I'm not necessarily talking about anything personal. It's more on a global level. So that is the geocentric picture. It's set for New York. Just a reminder, if you're in Australasia, things will be slightly different. So at noon in Sydney, the moon is at 27:21 Capricorn, and at noon in, I don't know, Wellington, New Zealand, the moon will be even earlier in Capricorn. So in Australasia, for much of the day, the moon will be in Capricorn, making a sextile to Neptune, making perhaps a trine to Uranus. So there is a slightly different feel to the day if you are in Australasia, and maybe you want to focus on that moon sextile Neptune, just tuning into the currents, tuning into whatever's going on around you on a psychic and a spiritual level. So that moon moving into Aquarius, you just might not feel the energy of it until very late in the day and into tomorrow. Turning to the heliocentric picture, here it is. This is when we make the sun the center of the solar system, and there you can see the Earth is at 7 Virgo. In a heliocentric chart, the Earth is always opposite to where the Sun is, and the Earth in Virgo is making a trine to Mercury. So I would have said that trine to Mercury is not a particularly dramatic influence, but it perhaps is about being able to say something. It's quite communicative. We can say what's on our mind. It's a good time for delivering messages, particularly of a broader global nature, on a sort of personal level. It can sometimes be difficult to pick up on these heliocentric aspects because they are collective. But maybe we should think back to what the geocentric picture is. So geocentrically, we have Mercury conjunct Saturn. Heliocentrically, we have Earth trine Mercury. So geocentrically, there's an indication of communication difficulties. Heliocentrically, there's a suggestion that things might not be so difficult. So Mercury conjunct Saturn, geocentrically, it's perhaps about how we structure our message, and heliocentrically, there's an indication that maybe there is a way of getting that message across. And another aspect today is a quincunx between Venus and Saturn. So Venus-Saturn quincunx, I would suggest that maybe it's going to feed into the Mercury conjunct Saturn geocentrically. Venus quincunx Saturn can be a bit of negativity about relationships, feeling that we can't get close to people, and on a sort of global diplomatic level, it can be about countries. How do countries relate to each other? They're trying to broker ceasefires. They're trying to get on with each other. But Venus quincunx Saturn suggests that there are some blocks to making diplomatic progress. So that's a heliocentric picture. And now I want to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, February the 25th, 2025. Aries. Aries, the moon is in Aquarius. Certainly if you're in Europe and America and in the Americas, and the moon in Aquarius is making a sextile to Venus. It's a very pleasant aspect, I would have said, and it really does allow you to get on with people, and you can present a fairly sort of positive image, positive impression. And of course you're helped by the fact that now finally Mars is stationary direct. In fact, it's moving a little. Yesterday Mars was at 1701 Cancer. Today it's at 1702 Cancer. So we have movement, we have forward movement. And I think if Aries, you're starting to feel that after a long period of things just not moving, then finally you can see some action. But sometimes forced inactivity can be a good thing. It can encourage you to think and ponder and to work out what's going on and to work out what your next move is. So there's no need to be in a hurry. It's early days, and things do take a little bit of time to develop. But with this moon sextile Venus, your ability to get on with people is really very good, and you don't have to get too emotional about it. In fact, getting too emotional about it is not the right approach. It's important to always have a certain distance. You want to get on with people, sure, but you don't need to get too close to them. And you can move from one person to the next. I don't think that you need to get totally hung up on any one person. But if you are concerned about relationships, this moon sextile Venus really should help. So if there's someone you want to get on with, then now would be a good time to do it, because there won't be much pressure. It will just be easy, and you can focus on the conversational side of things. And avoid getting too emotional. I think that in most cases that is the right approach. And if there's something you want to discuss in a way that is unemotional, or not unemotional, but isn't passionate. We're not talking about serious subjects here. But if there's something you want to discuss, then now might be the chance to do it. And also, with Mars going stationary direct, you might feel ready to do things which in the past you didn't feel it was the right time. And some of these activities might have a social nature. So if it's a situation where you feel you want to talk to someone, discuss something, get something out into the open, then now might be a good opportunity to do it. But you can't expect everything to be out into the open. The main aspect today, probably the most important aspect, for most of us, is going to be a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn. And that Mercury-Saturn conjunction in Pisces is going to mean that certain things will be kept hidden. Indeed, certain things have to be kept hidden. Someone would like to talk about them, but they can't. You know what they are. There are things maybe that you don't want to discuss, and you might feel that in an ideal world you would be able to talk about them, but Mercury conjunct Saturn, I don't think that's the right approach. So it's not a time for talking about everything under the sun, because some things are best left for later. So, do consider that, Aries. And as far as you're concerned, the focus should be on communication, but any kind of communication. If there's if there's something you can't talk about, then talk about something else. The key point is to keep the flow going. And this Mercury Saturn conjunction is not going to last forever. It's already starting to separate. It may be exact, but it needn't completely dominate proceedings. So overall, Aries is just a day when you're starting to change, you're starting to open up, and you're able to present a very favourable image. But don't be in too much of a rush to express everything, because some things are best left for later. Taurus, there is a conjunction between the moon and Pluto, and this conjunction is in Aquarius. And so Aquarius in the Taurean chart is fairly high profile, and it can be about how you want to proceed. And many Taureans are going to feel quite ambitious. You'll feel that there are things that need to be expressed, and you don't want to be held back. And moon conjunct Pluto can be very focused on itself and its desires. To talk about ambitions, that's a bit vague. There's also the concept of desire, something much stronger than that, which is connected with that moon conjunct Pluto. And perhaps that's something you've been feeling, ever since Pluto went into Aquarius, which was November the 17th, I think, of last year. And so moon conjunct Pluto, you feel that really it is time. It is time to tell the world what you want. Even if you don't tell the world, you just need to get on with it. And so, Taurus, consider, what is it? What is it that you feel that you're striving for? What is the most important thing? What is it that almost feels like a matter of life and death? Okay, not literally a matter of life and death, but you certainly don't want to hang around. And do also think about how you can articulate your desires. The moon does make a conjunction with Pluto, that is true. But the moon also makes a sextile with Venus. And Venus is, of course, your ruler. Venus is in a reasonable condition because of that mutual reception relationship by exaltation with the sun. So with the moon making a sextile to Venus, that's kind of a bit like the moon making a favourable contact to the sun because of Venus's reception with the sun. And so moon sextile Venus does allow you to find a way of relating. And the way you relate may not be obvious. It could be quite subtle. And you don't have to do things directly. Because, Taurus actually, in some ways, can actually be quite an unsubtle sign. Because, Taurus likes to say things as they are. If Taurus believes that something is true, then Taurus will just state it. It is what it is. But a bit of subtlety on your part with that moon sextile Venus could go a long way. You don't have to be right in the middle of things to have an influence, to have an impact. And if you actually listen to your feelings and you try to work out what's going on around you, you might actually become aware that things aren't moving very quickly, that it's like the atmosphere around you is heavy. This isn't really your problem, it's just the way it is, but the atmosphere is heavy. It's like the sort of psychic equivalent of, what do they call it, particulate matter, these impurities in the air, but there's a lot of impurity in the air. It's like lumps, there are almost pieces of rock floating in the ether which are preventing you from moving, or are preventing other people from moving. And so it is a dense atmosphere, and it may just feel that the gravity is higher than usual. So walking is difficult. It just takes a long time. Again, I'm not talking about anything literally, but walking, movement, action, it just takes its time. And maybe you just have to be aware of the situation, and also be aware of other people's weaknesses. Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn, so some people are holding things back, and they might have a sort of an underlying negativity to them, which is influencing their actions and their words. And so you might on the surface feel that you're not necessarily getting as much support as you'd like to have. But I must stress that it is not your fault. It's nothing to do with you. It's just about the way the world is working right now. And as I've already said, the moon is making a sextile to Venus. So as far as is possible, you are able to make a good impression, and you are able to articulate your desires and your ambitions, and people understand as far as they can, given their weaknesses, given their particular set of priorities. So, Taurus, I would just suggest just take it slowly and be satisfied with small gains. And you can be very satisfied with small gains, because actually, in a relative sense, you're probably going to make more progress than pretty much anyone else. So in a relative sense, Taurus, there really isn't much to complain about. Gemini, it's nice that the moon is moving into Aquarius and is moving out of Capricorn. The moon in Capricorn, okay, it happens once a month. You have to deal with the challenges of moon in Capricorn, having to look at things in a particular way, which might not feel entirely comfortable, might not feel that it's completely in line with your own sign, but still, moon moving into Aquarius, perhaps you can look back at the past, look back at what you learnt with moon in Aquarius, some of the insights you had. Sorry, when the moon was in Capricorn, there were insights, perhaps insights of an emotional nature, and you can carry them with you as the moon moves into Capricorn, as the moon moves into Aquarius. And with the moon in Aquarius, you have the chance to get a broader view and to get a sense of perspective. And that sense of perspective is actually very important, because there may be other things going on which you don't feel entirely comfortable with. And, that is because Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn. So the Mercury conjunct Saturn aspect could be difficult, but it depends how you interpret it. Interpretation is everything. So if you think about it, Gemini, Mercury is your ruler. And so when it's conjunct Saturn, that might indicate a certain amount of negativity. So how do you interpret something? There are many ways of interpreting things. And there's just a certain tendency with Mercury conjunct Saturn to interpret things in the most negative way possible. And in a way that is an option. And, this is why when I was talking about Mercury conjunct Saturn in the introduction to this video, I said that there is a strong cognitive basis to this aspect. It's about our cognitions and how we perceive the incoming information. So, Gemini, if you do find yourself being negative, even a little bit despondent, ask yourself why this might be the case and try to be objective about it. And it may be a situation where you create your own luck, or perhaps you even create your own misfortune. If you have a negative approach, that will create negative feedback, and that might impact your actions, and they won't work. You'll assume they're going to work, and you're going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, and so things could just go into a spiral where things just get worse and worse. That's one possibility. But another possibility is to just have awareness. If you are feeling negative, if you are feeling a little bit, dare I say it, depressed, but I do not mean that word depressed in a clinical way. If you do feel like that, it's just your perceptions. And there is actually a possibility of seeing things in a different way. And while I'm not a fan of positive thinking, I think with Mercury conjunct Saturn, there is a place for positive thinking, provided it is combined with focus and hard work, because that is another way of looking at the Mercury conjunct Saturn. Saturn is the planet of work, of discipline, of structure, and maybe, Gemini, you can turn that Mercury conjunct Saturn around and make it work in your favor. And if you have something that's important to you, a project, something you want to get off the ground, if you're working, something you're currently engaged with and it really matters, if you give it everything you've got, then I'm of the opinion that you're really going to make really good progress and that you can really make things happen. And it's because you don't assume anything. And that may be the advantage of a little bit of negativity. Yes, if you are negative, you might give up. But if you are negative, you might also have a gritty approach. This is going to be hard. This is going to be really difficult. Sort of blood, sweat, and tears, and all that kind of thing. Then, yeah, you'll give it everything you've got, and I think in most cases, you will be successful, and you will be helped also by the fact that the moon is in Aquarius, and the moon in Aquarius is going to give you a sense of perspective, hopefully. Now, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, the moon is not going to go into Aquarius until late in the day. So moon in Aquarius might be more about what's happening on Wednesday if you are in Australia or New Zealand or Kamchatka. But that moon in Aquarius is something about tomorrow, again, if you're in East Asia, Australasia. And so things could start off in a way that is more difficult than if you're, say, in Europe, Africa, or the Americas. But you just need to go with it. Keep going, keep struggling, keep pushing. And that's the way forward. And that's the way forward for all Geminis, wherever you are. It can be a tough day, but it needn't be a bad day. It can be a day where actually you cover a lot of ground. Cancer, moon is edging into Aquarius. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, not quite there yet, but it's getting there. And with the moon in Aquarius, it might seem that things are a little bit serious. Nothing can be taken too lightly, and really, Cancer, there's nothing wrong with taking yourself seriously, and taking your emotions seriously. You are basically being shown, the kind of person you are, and at the same time, you may have an opportunity to actually use your emotions as a way of making progress. If you're the one who is most emotionally mature, most emotionally aware, then you have a chance to have an impact, and you're possibly helped by the fact that Mars is now going stationary direct. So yesterday, Monday, might even have been late on Sunday, Mars went stationary. And now that Mars is moving forward, you have a chance to really start to assert yourself, and you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto. And with that moon conjunct Pluto, you seem to be the kind of person right now who is respected, and you give the impression maybe that you're not someone anyone wants to cross. There's something brewing, and it may not actually in reality be anything to be afraid of, but some people might be afraid of it. But I would have said it's a fairly healthy fear, and it's a kind of fear that leads to respect. So there's no reason why you shouldn't today be given the respect you deserve. And the moon, having made a conjunction to Pluto, moves on, and it makes a sextile to Venus. So moon sextile Venus, if you're a Cancerian, it's a good aspect. And this aspect between moon and Venus does, I think, give you more power. It's the power of your emotions, and the power of your feelings, and perhaps also the power of your convictions. And you can demonstrate this in terms of how you present yourself to society. That might be in your career or some other area, but you can present yourself as a powerful person, but who is also quite attractive. There's a certain charisma to you, an attractiveness about you, and people can't entirely avoid it. They notice you, and they notice that you've got something special. They're not quite sure what it is, but they feel that they shouldn't just ignore you, and perhaps they want to know what it is that you've got to offer, because you definitely do have something to offer. And if you're trying to win people's support or get people onto your side with this moon sextile Venus, I'm pretty confident that you actually you can do it, and you don't necessarily have to try too hard. And maybe it's all about not giving too much away, because if you give too much away, then you lose some of that hard aura, which I think is running in your favor. Having the giving impression of being quite a difficult, hard person, not someone that it's easy to get to know, but people want to get to know anyway. And if you can give that impression, even if you feel that it's slightly fake, I think that you'll be serving your interests very well. One word about the conjunction between Mercury and Saturn. Now, this conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, it might mean that you're quite serious about what you believe in, and you might be taking your beliefs seriously, and in certain situations you might not be willing to compromise or even consider alternatives. And perhaps that's a good thing. It's always good to have strong beliefs, but in some ways some of your beliefs may potentially be holding you up. If you believe in something too strongly, that removes the possibility of change, removes the possibility of progress. So have another look at what you believe in, and whether it's really serving your best interests. And also, Mercury conjunct Saturn may say something about closer relationships. It could be that some of the important people in your life have got something to say, something serious to say, and it's in your interests to listen and also take the opportunity to discuss. Some people want to discuss, as I said, especially the people close to you. There's something that needs to be said, that needs to be talked through. And if you take a serious approach, then you can probably reach some very useful conclusions. Leo, relationships may be of some importance over the course of the day, especially if you are in the Americas and Europe and Africa. If you're in Australasia, we may be talking about something sort of later in the day and maybe into tomorrow. But what we have, Leo, is we have the moon moving into Aquarius. And so, with the moon moving into Aquarius, we do think of the other person. And that's where the focus is. And so, do consider the role that other people have in your life, what kind of influence they have, and do try to be realistic, because what we have is not just the moon in Aquarius, but we have the moon making a conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius. So moon conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, there is a certain heaviness to it, and Pluto can be a fairly unconscious force, and there can be imaginings about what people are like and what they represent. And so it's important that you don't jump to conclusions, that you don't think that just because someone is ticking all the boxes in terms of your own stereotypes, that they really are the person you think they are. And always be prepared to take responsibility. So if you think that things are getting slow and you think that someone else is responsible, well, consider your own role in the thing. And you've always got a role. You're making choices, and you're making choices in different ways. You're making choices about how to perceive things and how to perceive people. You can perceive people as being monsters. You can perceive people as being saints. There is a certain choice, although there might also be a sense of psychological determinism, that in terms of your distant past, you're encouraged to give people particular roles and assume that they're just going to follow these roles. But everyone is a free spirit, and so you can't expect that people will always follow the role that you've assigned to them. Now, the moon, having made a conjunction to Pluto, it does make a sextile to Venus, and that sextile to Venus is a pleasant aspect, and it does relate to you as a Leo, because Venus is in mutual reception by exaltation to the Sun. So moon sextile Venus does indicate that you have pretty good social skills, and you know how to get on with people, and you're ready to give people a little bit of a break if you try. Just give people a chance. You're ready to do that. And if you give people a chance and you can sort of move beyond the roles you've placed upon them, you can be surprised to the upside. You can see, what people are really like, and what they can do for you, and how they can inspire you. And inspiration does matter today. You can inspire other people can inspire you, and it's important not to have any fixed view of the world, especially now with Mercury conjunct Saturn. So there is this aspect between Mercury conjunct Saturn, which affects all of us, but it affects you in the sense of how you relate to maybe some of your deeper feelings. I think it's quite an emotional impact, this Mercury conjunct Saturn in the Leo chart. It's about holding on to something, again, from the distant past, I think. Some deeper set of feelings which you're resisting, you're holding on to it. And the question is it doing you any good? Is it really worth the effort? Some feelings or set of feelings, they may be reassuring in a way because they remind you of the past. They provide a certain sense of constancy, but maybe it's time to move on. And that could be a way of dealing with this Mercury conjunct Saturn. And with Mercury conjunct Saturn, don't take things too seriously, Leo, especially on an emotional level. I mean, we all have emotions, but sometimes emotions can be a problem, and they can just hold you back, and they can just prevent you from taking advantage of the opportunities that are coming your way. And yes, I think they are coming your way, because that moon sextile Venus does indicate that you can get on with people and you can benefit from them, but you have to give them a chance. You have to give yourself a chance to see new possibilities. Virgo, we can't avoid the fact that Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn. Mercury conjunct Saturn is today the most important aspect, and inevitably is going to have an impact on you, because Mercury is your ruler. And with Mercury conjunct Saturn, there's always a danger of a certain amount of negativity. I mean, Saturn is a planet of realism, hyper-realism, even unrealistic realism that just takes things too far, and you just might reach the conclusion, Virgo, that there's nothing you can do, that there's no point, that you're in a situation that is fixed, that other people are not going to change, and there's no point in trying, that in many respects you are actually powerless. Now, you're not powerless. That's not true. But you might regard yourself as being powerless. And, as I've said in the introduction, and I've said to some of the other signs with this Mercury conjunct Saturn, I really must emphasize that there is a cognitive nature to it. A cognitive nature is how we perceive. And, we can perceive things in a completely negative way. We can regard everything as being just further evidence that everything is collapsing. That might be one way in which we could see Mercury conjunct Saturn. Everything supports a negative view, and it can just become just a cycle of negativity. And that's not something we want, and it's not something we need. And so, Virgo, do have an awareness of your own cognitions and the way you process information. And the information itself is neutral. It's neither good nor bad. And it's up to you how you process it. And you don't have to process it in a negative way. And you don't have to necessarily draw absolute conclusions, not just about yourself, but also about other people. You might reach conclusions today about other people, regarding them as being unhelpful, useless, destructive, whatever. You might reach those conclusions on the basis of fairly limited information, but you still feel that that's the only way it can be, that's the only way you can perceive it, and that would be a shame, and it would be unnecessary. So you need to work with this Mercury conjunct Saturn and maybe sort of transform its symbolism. And Mercury conjunct Saturn, you could say, is about structure and hard work. And if something is not working out, it's not giving you what you want, it's not the final state. If you work on something, and if you work on something really hard, you can change things round. And it may not be easy, but if you're self-aware, then you can do it. And this particularly applies to other people. Don't make assumptions about other people. Give people a chance, and if you can, work with people and try to understand what they're trying to express, and also try to understand other people's negativity, because this Mercury conjunct Saturn is not personal to you. You're not the only person who's being influenced by this Mercury conjunct Saturn. Yeah, you might be influenced by Morph and most of the other signs, but still everyone is feeling it. And so other people might have perceptions which are inaccurate. They might have their own negativity, and so if you're negative and they're negative, it just goes round and round. And maybe what you need to do, Virgo, is to sort of break the cycle. I'm not asking you to just be positive for the sake of it. I mean, that never gets anywhere usually, but rather to work with what you've got, and to keep working, and don't just give up if something goes wrong at the beginning, or something at least seems to go wrong, because so much of this is about perceptions. And it is a day when hard work is going to be rewarded, but it's probably not going to feel like it's going to be rewarded. It just might feel that it's a waste of time. You do something and you keep doing it, and you feel empty inside when you're doing it, and it just feels like there's absolutely no point. But if you just keep going, then you're going to find that in the end the gears start to engage, and you're going to find that you're getting to grips with whatever it is you're trying to get to grips with. And the moon eventually makes a sextile to Venus. And this moon sextile Venus, I would regard as being a very positive influence in terms of your own happiness and in terms of other people. And so if you keep working, eventually you will start to cheer up. There will be progress, and also you're going to start getting a more favourable response from other people. So don't give up on anyone, and don't assume that how things are at the beginning is how they're actually going to end up. Libra, the moon is moving into Aquarius at some stage. It may not move into Aquarius until quite late in the day if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but in the end it will get there. And so with the moon moving into Aquarius, you're feeling better, even though some people aren't feeling better. The main aspect today is a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, and I have been going on and on about this aspect and how difficult this aspect could be, at least in terms of one's perceptions. But you, Libra, I don't think you're going to feel this Mercury conjunction Saturn as much as other people. And I would have said that you can start to focus on that moon moving into Aquarius. And, Aquarius is a sign that you, Libra, have a natural sympathy with, because it's an air sign. And the moon in Aquarius, it makes a sextile to Venus. And so that moon in Aquarius sextile Venus, as far as I can see, should make you feel quite content, and also you get a sense of your own power, and what you can do, what you can achieve, and also what you can enjoy. Enjoyment does matter. And if you're not enjoying something, then you're not really going to be able to make the most of it. And ideally, Libra, you should be doing something that you really feel completely passionate about. I mean, after all, the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto. Moon conjunct Pluto is passionate, and moon conjunct Pluto in Aquarius can be passionate about your ideas, passionate about what you can do. And in fact, Libra, many people are outside of you, outside of your immediate area, are feeling a little bit negative, and it's just important that you don't pick up on that negativity. You don't allow other people's negativity to contaminate your own happiness. And that's the environment that you're dealing with, that is out there, and it needn't be anything to do with you. And so, Libra, there is an argument for containment, shutting the doors. I mean, to keep out the flood of negativity that is not your problem; it's other people's problem. And this means that you need to be choosy about who you hang out with. I mean, you don't necessarily have to hang out with anyone, but certain people are really negative at the moment, and they can bring you down. They can bring themselves down. They can bring you down. And what you need right now is you need happy, positive people who don't have chips on their shoulder. And you can find these people. The moon in Aquarius is making a sextile to Venus. Venus is your ruler, and that moon sextile Venus can actually be quite good for relationships, but it has to be the right relationship. Again, people who are not emotionally complicated, people who are positive and who are supportive of your creativity. And matters are helped by the fact, of course, that Mars is now stationary direct. Mars is a planet that has an impact on other people and how you relate to other people, because obviously Mars rules Aries, your opposite sign. Mars is stationary direct. So some people are positive and they have a constructive view. They have an increasingly constructive view, and so they can help you in terms of achieving whatever you want to achieve. So they can help you, but just not everyone is helpful, and you do have to decide which people are going to work in your favor, which people are going to work against you. Now, one thing about health, we've got a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, and as far as is possible, you should try to avoid this Mercury-Saturn conjunction, and I don't think it has an impact on you directly, but with this Mercury conjunct Saturn, it's just possible that things get a little bit stuck, a little bit stifled, and that might be to do with the social environment in which you're in. And maybe, Libra, if you're feeling not on best form, it's not to do with you, it's to do with your environment. And so from a health perspective, it's important that you have as much freedom as possible, that you have free self-expression. And it just may be that if you're feeling not on best form, if you're feeling, slightly unwell or for whatever reason, okay, there might be a real physical reason which needs to be attended to, but it might be that you're just responding to an environment which isn't as helpful as it need to be, and in which case you should just move somewhere else. Oh, and finally, Mercury conjunct Saturn. Watch your feet. Your feet may be slightly more vulnerable than usual, so do make sure you're wearing a good pair of shoes, and careful where you step. Remember, Mercury conjunct Saturn is aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So if we want to look at this in the absolute worst possible light, Libra, well, we could say accidents connected with the feet. So I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm just saying look after your feet. today. Maybe not just today, but tomorrow as well. If you've got a physical weak spot, I would have said it was your feet, but I'm sure that you will look after your feet and everything will be fine. Scorpio. Scorpio, the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto, and it's making a conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius. And because of this conjunction, many Scorpios may feel that they need their own space, and you perhaps feel that they're just things that need to be worked out. And we can maybe see this in the context of Mars being stationary direct. So Mars is your ruler. It did come to a standstill yesterday, or maybe late on Sunday if you're in the Americas. But with Mars stationary direct, it is a time when you need to respect your own space. Mars is at 1702 Cancer. Yesterday it was at 1701 Cancer. So it's pretty much stationary still. And so with Mars stationary direct, now that Moon is in Aquarius, Moon is in the most private part of your section of your most private sector of your chart. Now that the moon is there, then you need to think about everything. You need to work things out, and it might be a time for contemplation and observation, rather than feeling that you have to be out there making things happen, that you have to worry about social pressures. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, there might be certain issues with your family and your home that need your attention, but aside from that, I wouldn't put yourself out. And also, do think about the future, what you're going to be doing in the future, and what might be possible. And today there is a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn. So this conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, I do regard it as being a big deal. And the whole this video is really about Mercury conjunct Saturn, and I will be going into further detail about Mercury about this conjunction between Mercury and Saturn at the end of this video. And this Mercury-Saturn conjunction perhaps is about you thinking about what you can do and what you can't do, and whether or not you're being realistic. So you are thinking about what you're able to do, what you're able to achieve, and you're thinking about what you've been given, the abilities you've been given, what makes you stand out. And this has been happening quite a lot recently, I think, because of all this stuff in Pisces. We've got planets in Pisces. You've got Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune in Pisces. Pisces is a sign in the Scorpio chart that is really very creative, and it is about you. It's about what you have to offer, not what other people have got to offer. And so with Mercury conjunct Saturn, you may be taking this whole thing very seriously. And at times you might be thinking, well, you've got nothing to offer. What makes you special? Nothing makes you special. That's how you could feel with Mercury conjunct Saturn. That would be an erroneous feeling. Instead, with Mercury conjunct Saturn, it's about thinking about what you really have got to offer, what makes you unique, and Mercury conjunct Saturn is inviting you to really work on it. And so ideally, Scorpio, you would spend the day concentrating on the things you enjoy, the things that make you feel good, the things you feel really you were born with. You were born to do something, and today you need to think about what you were born to do. And this Mercury conjunct Saturn well, I mean, I shouldn't mix my systems. I mean, there's always a problem with mixing systems, but if we want to take things to a certain level, we could say, well, you're a Scorpio. Pisces is represents your fifth house, and in Indian astrology there is this concept of purva punya, which is past life credit. I think that's how James Braha described it in his book about Indian astrology that he wrote in the 1980s. And so Purva Punya is past life credit, and it's particularly associated with the fifth life. But sorry, the fifth house. I mean, it could be the fifth life, probably more than that if we go through the circle of incarnations. But past life credit. And so, what is that past life credit? And Mercury conjunct Saturn may be asking you about it. What did you bring? And if you want the credit, you have to continue with what you're doing, maybe. And so if you work on what you're good at, if you work on what you've been put on this planet for, then the credit will be coming your way. So maybe, Scorpio, that's how you need to approach Mercury conjunct Saturn. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether you believe in incarnation, in reincarnation or not. You can perhaps see it as symbolic of something, and so if you work on the right things, you will definitely get the credit. Sagittarius, it's kind of nice that the moon is moving into Aquarius. Sagittarius and Aquarius, two signs that relate to each other quite well. And with the moon moving into Aquarius, you're feeling that you can say things. You perhaps haven't said them in the past, but now you feel a little bit better able to communicate, but in a gentle way. You don't have to say everything on your mind. In fact, you're not going to want to say everything, because when the moon moves into Aquarius, it also makes a conjunction to Pluto. And so with the moon making a conjunction to Pluto, there are certain things you do take seriously, and you know that if you are going to talk about them, you have to get it right. You have to use the right language. You can't say the first thing that comes to your mind. And so you need to think about what you say, and you also need to think about the power of your words. And your words can be very powerful, provided you get your timing right and you say them correctly. And you don't mess things up by actually saying more than you have to. Now, I should say that this moon moving into Aquarius, moon conjunct Pluto, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, that may be more about later in the day, this evening. But the moon is going to move into Aquarius, is going to make that conjunct Pluto at some stage, wherever you are. And the moon, having made a conjunction to Pluto, is going to move on to a sextile of Venus. And I think all of us will feel that sextile to Venus. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, it might be a little more remote, might be more subtle. If you're in the Americas, you really will feel it as the day progresses. And that moon sextile Venus is great for relationships and getting on with people, and you will know what to say, and you will know that you don't have to take things too seriously. Moon sextile Venus is quite a light aspect, and it's about it's about what you say that is important to you, but it doesn't have to be super important, and you don't have to get heavily emotional. That moon sextile Venus is not a heavily emotional aspect. It's about having a certain sense of objectivity, but just enjoying people's company and having good conversation. So in many respects, today is probably easier than yesterday. Yesterday there might have been sort of important material things that you found yourself having to deal with, found yourself having to worry about. And today you can maybe sort of move on. Now, there is another thing going on today which is affecting everyone, but there is a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn. And this Mercury conjunct Saturn is in Pisces, and this aspect may encourage you to have serious thoughts about security, home, family, where you live, and there might be a sense of realization about your family or what's going on in your home, about where you live, and you need to get a sense of perspective. There is some danger that you are overly negative with that Mercury conjunct Saturn, especially to do with things to do with home and family. You might say something to a member of your family which you regret, or you might reach conclusions about them which are too negative. And because this Mercury conjunct Saturn is in Pisces, in such a secret sector of your chart. Now, secret's not quite the right word, but it's right at the roots of things, and there might be a certain lack of objectivity there, a lack of a different approach. So you might start to feel negative about some aspect of home and family, and this negativity could just continue. It could just feed into itself. And that might be the case if you don't air the subject. The subject does need to be aired. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be discussed. And rather than being negative, you need to be constructive. What do you need to do to feel more comfortable? What do you need to do to get on better with your family? What do you need to suggest to your family so that they can behave better, for example? And if you are constructive and you don't jump to conclusions, then I think that you can deal with this Mercury conjunct Saturn. But what you don't want to do is completely sit on it and have negative feelings which are just sort of going nowhere, except just diminishing your happiness. And the Mercury conjunct Saturn exists for a purpose. It's not just there to make you feel miserable. It's there to allow you to be constructive and to consider the possibility of change. And a few Sagittarians with this Mercury conjunct Saturn may actually reach a conclusion that where they're living, for one reason or another, isn't ideal, and maybe you should be moving somewhere else. I mean, that's possible. I mean, I don't think most of you are going to feel that, but I'm just saying that it's something you should consider. But that's just one possibility. The key point with this Mercury conjunct Saturn is that things can always be changed through concentration and hard work and honesty. Capricorn, the big aspect today is Mercury conjunct Saturn, and I've been going on and on about it, and whether or not it's a good or a bad thing, it kind of depends on your approach and depends on how you want to relate to it. Now, for you, this Mercury conjunct Saturn is probably pretty positive because it doesn't damage you. You are not damaged by Saturn because you are Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn, and so with Mercury conjunct Saturn, that means that you do have the opportunity to talk, be yourself, to engage. And in fact, many Capricorns may actually be more talkative than usual. And that's not something one would normally associate with Mercury conjunct Saturn, because we focus on Saturn as being the thing which shuts everything down. But because you are Saturn and you are influenced by Mercury, the mercurial influence is going to allow you to open up, to talk about your ideas, and to consider new possibilities. Especially as that Mercury is strong, because that Mercury is in mutual reception to Jupiter by sign. And so with Mercury conjunct Saturn, there are lots of things you would like to talk about. You're not going to talk about things just for the sake of it. I mean, you are a Capricorn. I mean, there is a sensible streak to every Capricorn, and just talking for the sake of talking, that's not what the average Capricorn is into. So you can discuss serious issues with Mercury conjunct Saturn, and you can go to different places. There's something quite flexible about this Mercury conjunct Saturn, and you can move from one place to another place, spreading your sunshine. Well, it's not really sunshine, but Saturn doesn't shine. Saturn shine. No, that sounds awful. But you can spread your light, your somewhat Saturnine light, but you certainly can do it. And as you move from place to place, if you want to move from place to place, it's probably not a good idea to restrict your activities to just one place. Even if you are physically in one place, you can, use your phone or social media or whatever to just be in a state of communication, constant communication. The possibility of constant communication, because really, Capricorn, you do actually have a lot to say, and it could have been building up for some time. This feeling that something has to move, and at the same time, though, Capricorn, don't be careless. And Capricorn is not a careless sign. It's a sign that does look after itself. But this Mercury conjunct Saturn is aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So I've already mentioned this, Capricorn, that you might be accident prone. I've mentioned this over the last couple of days. I continue to say this. Maybe you'll be uncharacteristically hasty in one instance. You have a sensible day, but just for 5 seconds you lose your concentration. You're in a hurry. You do something, and it could cause an argument, could cause an injury. So do be careful today, and tomorrow, because of this way in which Mercury conjunct Saturn is hitting it's to be technical about it. The Mercury conjunct Saturn is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and the Mars-Uranus midpoint, can be accident prone. So I'm looking at this again in the worst possible light, but I just thought I did need to give you that warning, just in case. Now, the moon is in Aquarius, and the moon is making conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius, and so Aquarius can be a sign which is financially orientated, from a Capricorn perspective. And with moon conjunct Pluto, there may be times where you actually take money quite seriously, and some aspect of money, it just may be that you're buying something in a grocery store and you see that you've been charged too much, or you may just want to go through a receipt, or maybe you've been double charged or something like that, or maybe it's happened in the recent past. There's a possibility with moon conjunct Pluto that you may take a relatively small amount of money very seriously, and I don't know whether that's the right thing to do. You have to ask yourself about the situation, but the financial details should not be ignored, or probably will not be ignored. And it is important to get a sense of perspective. Now, the moon, having made a conjunction to Pluto, does make a sextile to Venus, and that moon sextile Venus, that could also be financial, but I think the moon sextile Venus is likely to be fortunate. It's something you can do to improve your financial situation, or you may see an opportunity to save yourself some money. Perhaps you thought you were going to have to spend some money on something perhaps around the home. You thought you were going to have to spend money on it, and then you look at it again and you realize that you don't actually have to spend the money, and that's good. I mean, if you can save a few dollars or pounds, or euros, that would be great. And I think that's something you can do with Moon sextile Venus. Aquarius. The Moon is moving into your sign. It might not be until later in the day if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but that the Moon moves into Aquarius. But it's happening, and if you're in Europe or the Americas, the Moon is definitely going to be in Aquarius pretty much all day. So in London, Moon moves into Aquarius at 5:40 a.m. 6:40 a.m. if you're in Paris or Rome or Berlin. So that's where the Moon is, and having a Moon in your sign does make you feel better, I think, and it makes you feel more dynamic, and you're aware of the various possibilities before you, and you can be more positive and more upfront, and also more powerful, because the Moon, when it moves into Aquarius, it makes a conjunction to Pluto. So Moon conjunct Pluto, that's about you, Aquarius, having an impact. You are in control, and you do things your way, and if you don't want to do something, you don't do it. The Aquarius is a fixed sign, and so that Moon conjunct Pluto, it can be rigid, but it can also be focused, and it's a time when I think you do have to be focused. And if you can focus on one thing that is really important to you, then I think that you really can get things done, and you can make things happen, and you can certainly have an impact. And then the Moon making a conjunction to Pluto, it moves on and it makes a sextile to Venus. And Moon sextile Venus, it's a pleasant aspect which provides a bit of softness to the day. I mean, Moon conjunct Pluto is a bit of a harsh aspect. It might work in your favor, but it's still harsh. Moon sextile Venus is softer, and it allows you to be a nicer person, and you can be friendly, but not too friendly. There is always going to be that Aquarian aloofness to you, but you can be friendly enough with Moon sextile Venus, and people are going to like what you have to say. I mean, you will indeed have a lot to say today, not just because the Moon is sextile Venus, it's also because Mercury is conjunct Saturn. So Saturn is your ruler, Mercury is making the conjunction to Saturn. So there's a lot you can say, and it may be, Aquarius, you feel that now is the time to say something, because you'll be able to get the balance right. And maybe we have to contrast Mercury conjunct Saturn with Moon sextile Venus. So Mercury conjunct Saturn is about communication, which really concentrates on your interests, what's important to you. Moon sextile Venus has a friendliness to it. People like you with Moon sextile Venus, and so now might be a chance to pursue your own interests, including your own financial interests, if need be. You can pursue your own interests, but in a way which is friendly and which doesn't arouse people's suspicions or make people sort of close up. And so you can get through to people. Now, this Mercury conjunct Saturn, it's not just about you, Aquarius. Everyone is experiencing Mercury conjunct Saturn, and a lot of people are feeling a little bit negative. And this negativity, Aquarius, is something you just understand. You understand why people are being negative, why people have perhaps a rather grim view of the world. You get it all. And because of that, it may be you have this unique ability at the moment to get certain people to open up about what's bothering them. Because somehow you're on their wavelength. You understand their fears. And so if there's something that needs to be talked about, but something that needs to be discussed, I think you might be the person to initiate contact. And so Aquarius, you're not damaged by this Mercury conjunct Saturn. It's kind of you. And you can use it in whatever way you want. You can use it to make the world a better place. You can also use it to pursue your own best interests. I mean, I suppose that's up to you. So there is a sort of a moral dimension to that. You've got to be aware of the moral limits. I mean, you don't want to do anything that is completely immoral, manipulating people, using other people's distress for your own advantage, which you could do. The less scrupulous Aquarians amongst you, who are probably not listening to this video anyway, but the less scrupulous Aquarians might want to take advantage of that. But I would suggest that you don't. And one other thing, Aquarius, Saturn is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and I've said this before. It lasts for a long time, the Saturn square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. But this aspect between Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint may be stronger than usual. And the reason for that is because Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn. And that Mercury conjunct Saturn is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And because of this, there is some possibility that you get into something which is more dramatic than expected. Because Mars-Uranus as a pair are difficult, unstable, unpredictable, sometimes associated with accidents and explosions, and you might just get into something that you hadn't expected. You hadn't expected that people were going to respond in the way they do. And it might be something you say. In most cases, Aquarius, you're going to have a way with words. You're going to be able to say the right thing. But there just might be the occasional situation where a bit of extra sensitivity is required. Also, of course, with Saturn square Mars-Uranus midpoint, don't take physical risks. It really is not a time for this. I know I've already said that. I think I said that yesterday, but I do have to repeat that message. It would be irresponsible of me not to, though I'm sure nothing bad will happen, but I just think I just had to sort of point that out one more time. Pisces. Pisces, it may not be a brilliant day. That is possible. It just may be the kind of day that it just feels that things aren't really working and you feel that things are just somewhat stuck. It may not be that you're stuck, it may be that other people are stuck, but in general, it just may be very difficult to get anything done. And this is especially the case if you are really trying to make things happen. If you're in a hurry, you want action, and if you take that kind of approach, you could just end up getting nowhere. So if you want anything to happen today, you've got to be subtle. You've got to expect other people to be a little bit sluggish. In fact, perhaps to be very sluggish. We have a Mercury's conjunct Saturn today. Mercury can represent other people. It's conjunct Saturn. People are slow. And if you're in a hurry, then you can be in a hurry, but don't expect any support. And so, in that sense, Pisces, it could actually be a very frustrating day, and you may be disappointed, with the results. On the other hand, if you have a slower approach, you're not looking for anything, you don't have any expectations, then I do think it will be easier, and you can start to tune into some of the positives about today. One positive about today is the fact that the moon is making a sextile to Venus, and Venus, as we know, is in mutual reception with the sun by exaltation. So that moon sextile Venus indicates you making slow progress. You get closer and closer to what you want, but you're not in a hurry. And if there's something you want, you have to be almost quite feline about it. You have to slowly work your way towards it. I suppose if we treat your goal as being some kind of prey, you have to be very, very silent about it, or like some kind of tiger moving towards its prey. No sudden movements. If there's a sudden movement, you'll just lose it and your prey will run off. I'm sorry, I'm not advocating that you prey on anything or anyone. I'm using that as an analogy for you moving towards your goals, whatever you want to achieve. But you've got to be subtle, and you really mustn't expect things to immediately come together. And as far as relationships are concerned, this Mercury conjunct Saturn may say something about another person's state of mind, particularly the people close to you, but it may actually be everyone you come across, or it may seem like everyone you come across. Other people right now do just seem to have a somewhat negative view of the world. It's not a negative view that you share. I don't think you yourself are particularly negative right now, but you may become negative because you just don't think other people or the world in general are being helpful. But try to understand what is holding people up, and what people are worried about. And that Mercury Saturn conjunction is in Pisces. It is in your sign. So people are prepared to be responsive to you, but you've got to be subtle. And you're also helped by the fact that the moon is sextile Venus. So if you treat people in a subtle way and you give everyone time, then eventually they'll open up, and you'll see what any problems are, and maybe you'll have a chance to resolve things, or at least move people a little bit closer to resolution. And so that's a general approach, Pisces. So it's not a brilliant day, but if you handle things correctly, then I think that you will make some gradual progress, and you've got to be really accommodating of other people. You've really got to understand the human element and its complications. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from a viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 54, the marrying maiden. And this hexagram is, at least on the surface, is about relationships. It's about someone being in a hurry. The marrying maiden, the symbol is of a young woman being in a hurry to get married. And this hurry is not considered to be particularly decent. It's too hasty. And why is someone in such a hurry? And if we expand the symbolism on, it's not just about relationships and marriage. It's about people being in a hurry. If someone is in a hurry, they want something. What do they want? If that hurry is indecent, then you've got to question people's motives, and you've got to question, why are they being impatient? And so this would indicate anyone that is pressurizing you. So it could be a nuisance phone call, someone trying to get you to panic, saying that your financial details have been compromised. So could you give them hand over all your passwords, that kind of thing. And also salespeople trying to get you to sign on a dotted line, trying to get you to do something, but in a hurry. It's always a hurry. If you don't do it today, you'll miss a discount. It'll be more expensive tomorrow. And so that could be how the marrying maiden works, and it needn't be about romance or relationships. It can just be about pressure and feeling pressured by another person. And so, for your own part, with this marrying maiden, it's just telling you to slow down, don't be in a hurry. So if there's something you want, or perhaps a person you want, don't be in too much of a hurry. Don't be too hasty. Try to work out what's going on. And we do have two moving lines here. The fifth line moves and the sixth line moves. And fifth line it's quite a good line. And the fifth line it's about class, actually, in some respects. It's about the dissolution of class barriers. I'm talking about social class here. The symbolism it uses is of the emperor's daughter marrying someone below her station, and it's seen to be the right thing to do. And so in terms of dealing with other people, don't be too class orientated. I know that I'm from the UK, and so the UK is notorious for being a class-based society. Britain, class. But I'm not convinced that Britain is the only country in the world that is obsessed about class. I mean, living in the United States, I think that class is very important in this country. I think it's just as important as race. I actually got to read To Kill a Mockingbird a few years ago. I read it back to back. I read To Kill a Mockingbird, and then I read Go Set a Watchman. And the thing about To Kill a Mockingbird is it's supposed to be all about race. But when I read the book, I thought the book was about class. I thought class was actually more important than race in To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know. That was my view of the book, and the tight social class in the community that was being tight social class divisions in this community that was being described in To Kill a Mockingbird. But class does matter, and it's not just a British thing. And so we all have stereotypes about class and station, and with that fifth line moving, it's saying don't get too focused on what someone is on the surface, on what they're wearing, how they speak. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. So the fifth line is very positive, and that's perhaps saying how we should deal with people. So if we meet people over the course of the day, give them a chance. Don't jump to conclusions. But then the sixth line moves, and the sixth line is not good. And the sixth line has some rather disturbing symbolism. It talks about the woman carrying a fruit bowl with no fruit, the man stabbing a sheep, but there's no blood. And that, of course, is talking about sacrifice. We're not talking about sacrifices here, but we're talking about empty offerings here. Something where we go through the motions of something, and it's actually empty, and we're talking about, it might be about a relationship which in the end is about nothing. People go through the motions. I mean, and symbolically, one can go through the motions of a wedding ceremony, but it's meaningless. The actual heart of it, the whole thing is just absent. And so that may, in the end, say something about some of the relationships you're involved with, some of the people you have to deal with. In the end, it's just surface appearances, and fundamentally it doesn't mean anything. And then, because we've got two moving lines, we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram 10, which is treading. And treading is possibly more optimistic, and I think we do see development here, because with the previous hexagram, which was 54, it was really about holding back, not moving forward. With the marrying maiden, she's in a hurry. She wants to get married. Her hurry is not good. She's being a bit too previous, as they say. And then we move to treading. And treading means actually we can move forward. We can make progress. Maybe it's progress in terms of a relationship, in terms of dealing with other people. But it's treading. We have to be very, very careful, because with treading, we are treading potentially on the tiger's tail, and we don't want to tread on the tiger's tail, because if we tread on the tiger's tail, we might get bitten. So we have to negotiate this obstacle, but we have to have a certain bravery to us. We do have to move forward, but we have to move forward very gingerly, very carefully, and we have to get around this obstacle. So in the end, we can start moving forward. Maybe it's moving forward with a relationship, but we have to be careful. And we must watch our every step. But if we are careful, we are going to get around the obstacle, and in the end, we're going to make progress, and we're going to get closer to our objective. And now, on the subject of being very careful, we have to consider Mercury conjunct Saturn, because it's quite a cautious conjunction, isn't it? And today we do have a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn. And so in the thumbnail, there's Saturn, and that planet is not the moon; it's Mercury. And so here is the conjunction between Mercury and Saturn. So this conjunction, I make it. It happens at 12:02 p.m. London time. So that aspect between Mercury and Saturn is going to be very early in the morning. If you're in the Americas, it's going to be lunchtime, Europe, America, Africa, early afternoon. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then it's not going to happen until late this evening. I think in New Zealand, maybe even early tomorrow morning. So this Mercury-Saturn conjunction, I do think it's to a great extent is about our perceptions. I do think it's a very cognitive aspect, and we might see things in a negative light. I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Because Mercury is our mind, and Saturn is the planet of limitation and structure, but also negativity. And so we get information coming our way. How do we interpret this information? We interpret it in the worst possible light. And so if today we find ourselves feeling negative, depressed, hopeless, then we should remind ourselves that it's just Mercury conjunct Saturn. This aspect is going to move on. It's short-lived. And so we can then get a perspective on some of our feelings and on some of our negativity. And I do actually find that's one of the most useful things about astrology. For example, if you've got Saturn transiting your Mercury, then you feel that you can feel really bad about it. But once you know Saturn is conjunct aspecting your Mercury, when you can say, oh well, it's just Saturn, just let it run on, and that could be this. That could be just how this Mercury Saturn conjunction is working. And there's then the question: how is it going to affect us down here on planet Earth with this particular conjunction between Mercury and Saturn? So we can look at its aspects. This Mercury-Saturn conjunction is making a semi-sextile to Chiron. Now, I don't normally look at semi-sextiles in this kind of context, but the reason I'm looking at this semi-sextile is simply because the semi-sextile is so close. It's sort of, 11 minutes out. So there may be a Chiron feel to this Mercury-Saturn conjunction, and it just may be more of the same, feeling maybe wounded, feeling that we are somehow isolated, that there might even be a sense of injustice, and that we have to do something to change the situation. That might be the semi-sextile. Chiron is not just a wounded healer. Chiron is the maverick, can be the revolutionary, and we have to bring something into our sphere which is different, and it's a struggle. We don't want to do it because we don't think there's any point, but maybe we can do it. And if we can find a way of being different, of being a maverick, of being a rebel, then maybe that is something we can do, and that's something perhaps we can be striving to do. And also Mercury conjunct Saturn, being aware not just of our own negativity, but also other people's negativity. And Chiron might suggest that we can do something to heal that negativity. So rather than focusing on what's wrong with us, maybe we should be focusing on what's wrong with other people and what can we do to heal it. And maybe a problem shared, a problem halved. Or if we tell people why we feel negative, we might hear about why they're feeling negative, and that might create some kind of a healing process. Now, we can look at this moment when Mercury goes direct from the viewpoint of midpoints. Now, if you think about midpoints, you will see that here is Uranus, here is Mars, and the Mars-Uranus midpoint is at 20 degrees Gemini. So that means that this Mercury-Saturn conjunction is making a square to the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So let me just show you this in terms of the 90-degree dial. So there's the Mercury-Saturn conjunction, and if we put that Mercury-Saturn conjunction on the arrow, and there is Mars, there is Uranus. So you can see from a symmetry perspective that both Mercury and Saturn are on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So Saturn has been on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, has been making the square to the Mars-Uranus midpoint for quite a long time, for quite a few days. But now Mercury is joining Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So Mercury is acting as a trigger. And so that Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, its full potential is starting to make itself felt. And you could see that as being quite violent. The pressure is building and something has to give. We can't deal with it anymore. And something might have to just explode. And to provide a bit of objectivity, might be a good idea to see what Reinhold Ebertin in his book Combination of Stellar Influences says about Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And he says violence, a lack of adaptability, energy concentrated on separation, a heavy injury, an operation, violent destruction. So that may say something about today and what's happening in the world. And then there might be some event relating to Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. I mean, if you look at what he says about Mercury on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, the inclination to act independently, the inclination to draw heavily on one's nervous energy reserves, a test of strength or power carried through calculatingly, an achievement, an excessive irritation of the nerves. So that's what Reinhold Ebertin says, and turning to Witter in Alfred Witter's Rules for Planetary Pictures, he says Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. He'll say something similar to Ebertin, I think, but maybe there'll be a slight difference. He says, sudden stop or interruption of one's work, violent separation, amputation, caesarean section. And so that's a slightly different view, but you get the idea of violence and separation. And so it is, I think, quite a difficult aspect, or rather a difficult midpoint configuration, this Mercury-Saturn conjunction on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And I just wanted to see if there was anywhere in the world where, let's look at the astrocartography of this conjunction, see if anything anywhere really comes to mind. I'm not saying that anywhere does come to mind. Well, if we look at the astrocartography, there's that Mercury Saturn conjunction. It goes right through Europe, and so Europe is certainly a place to look for, and it's always Europe. I mean, I apologise for this, but we've just had elections in Germany, and the elections in Germany weren't particularly surprising, I don't think. The AfD didn't do better than expected. They got about 20% of the vote, but still, it does represent a new government, I assume. And so, what I thought I would do is let's relocate that to Berlin. And let's relocate that chart to see how that aspect might occur to Germany. So this is the Mercury conjunct Saturn set for Berlin, and you can see that Mercury conjunct Saturn is right on the midheaven, and also Mars is on the ascendant. So this is a part of the world which is very much going to feel this, and you've got a situation where you've got, if we look at the axis of symmetry is going to really link the ascendant midheaven midpoint and the Mars-Saturn midpoint. They're going to come together. So there's the Mars-Saturn midpoint and the ascendant midheaven midpoint. Yeah, they're very close. So Mars rising Mars on the ascendant, Mercury Saturn on the midheaven in Germany. It's not going to be easy. One thought it might be easy. People are being optimistic about, now Friedrich Merz is going to be chancellor, and everything's fine. The AfD only got 20%, but it's possibly going to be a lot more difficult than people realise. And so I think that Germany gets the full force of this Mercury-Saturn conjunction, especially because not just because that Mercury Saturn is on the midheaven, if we set the time of that conjunction to Berlin, but also the fact that Mars is on the ascendant. And then we perhaps should be considering who's going to be influenced by this. In terms of famous people. So one person who is likely to be influenced by this Mercury-Saturn conjunction is actually Friedrich Merz. So Friedrich Merz, he's the head of the Christian Democrats in Germany. So here is his chart, and his Mercury is at 4 degrees 57 Scorpio. So what that means is the Mercury-Saturn conjunction is the Mercury-Saturn conjunction is at 20 Pisces. So the Mercury-Saturn conjunction is sesquiquadrate his Mercury. So in terms of Mercury, it's his thoughts, the way he's communicating. I think he's going to be quite pressurized with this aspect. I mean, he at the moment, of course, is happy because his party got the most votes, but the reality of having to negotiate and have to deal with these other parties who he might not agree with is going to be really stressful for him. And so this will certainly put him under a lot of pressure. And there are other politicians who could be influenced by this aspect. And turning to France, we have one of the leaders of the National Rally, a sort of right-wing party, which Marine Le Pen is also involved with, Jordan Bardella, I think. I always get corrected when I get his name wrong. But so he has his sun at 2018 Virgo, and it is opposition his Saturn at 21-25 Pisces. And so he really does get hit. And let's just show you what this is. So he is coming up for his Saturn return. His Saturn return. Remember, it's not his Saturn return. Is that absolutely right? Yeah, his Saturn return. So Jordan Bardella is really young. He's 29, and so his Saturn return is coming up. And his Saturn is opposition his Sun, and Mercury is acting as a trigger. So I have no idea what's happening in Jordan Bardella's life. I haven't really been following French politics over the last couple of weeks, but he may be in the spotlight, and he may be about to approach some kind of crisis, which may relate to his Saturn return, and it, of course, might not have anything to do with his political career, but one should be looking at Jordan Bardella, over the next week, because I do think this Mercury-Saturn conjunction hits him quite seriously, and certainly if I was advising him, I would really be advising caution. It's not just the fact that it's hitting his Sun; it's looking at his ascendant. His ascendant is at 21-24 Sagittarius, so he's got Mercury and Saturn square his ascendant. He needs to be careful, because this could be a really big Saturn return for him. And other politicians, Gavin Newsom seems to be governor of California. I've talked about him quite recently, and Gavin Newsom has Pluto rising at 21 Virgo. And he has Mars on the IC, and so Mars-Pluto is really strong in his chart because it's angular. And so what's happening is that there's a Mercury-Saturn conjunction on his descendant, so square his Mars, opposition his Pluto. I would have said this might be quite difficult for him. He does seem to be under pressure. Mars is going stationary direct right now at 17-1 Cancer. So Mars is already stationary direct opposition his moon. So there's his moon at 1631 Capricorn. All I know about him, I did see this news story that he's asked for $40 billion of federal aid for the fires, but it may be some more more sort of aftershocks from the fires. But I think there is some threat here to Gavin Newsom. There's some challenge coming up with this Mercury-Saturn conjunction, or at least there's the potential for a challenge there. And Donald Trump, he doesn't get away from it. He doesn't escape Mercury conjunct Saturn, because Donald Trump has got, he's got a full moon, moon at 2112 Sagittarius, Sun at 2256 Gemini. This Mercury-Saturn conjunction is not exactly on his full moon, but it's a reminder that Saturn is moving towards the square of his moon, square of his sun, and Mercury is also about to square his sun and his square his moon. Remember, Donald Trump is the head of state of the United States. I mean, I know that's obvious, but because of that, aspects of Donald Trump's chart may have an effect on the US itself. So it seems that Trump is about to have to deal with some significant challenges. This Mercury-Saturn conjunction is in his 7th house, and it could be about his enemies. And he has had issues with his enemies while Saturn has been moving through Pisces. That was when this lawfare really kicked off, when Saturn went into his 7th house. But his Placidus 7th house. If you're into whole signs, it would be his 8th house. But it does really put him under a lot of pressure. So he's really someone I would want to be looking at. And finally, there is there's George Soros. I don't know what George Soros is doing. Here's George Soros's chart. George Soros has his Mars at 1940 Gemini, and we don't know what time he's born, but maybe his moon at 21 Pisces. I don't think so. I mean, I've just taken a noon chart, but George Soros has got Mars. Has got Mercury Saturn square his Mars. I mean, that may just be about him having to watch where he goes. I mean, how old is he? George Soros is 90. He's 94. So he does have to be careful with this with Mercury Saturn hitting his Mars. But there may be a sense of frustration when he looks at where the world is going, and given his own ambitions and the political agenda he was pushing, he may just feel a frustration that things aren't happening in a way he had expected. And King Charles has his ascendant at 5 degrees 24 Leo. So that means that the Mars-Saturn conjunction at 2016 Pisces is exactly sesquiquadrate his ascendant. And that might not be easy for him. I don't know whether that's going to affect his health. There may be a sense of realization here, a sense of disappointment, or just something might go wrong for him. I don't think it's a very comfortable sesquiquadrate for him. And we shouldn't forget that Camilla, his wife, has her ascendant at 454 Leo. So they both have their Leo. They both have their ascendant at 5 Leo, and this Mercury-Saturn conjunction is hitting both of their ascendants by sesquiquadrate. And so that fact may indicate there's something going on, perhaps. It is really quite depressing, quite disappointing. And it's would seem to me to be difficult. And while we're on the subject, Meghan, I really have been trying to avoid Meghan recently, Harry's wife. Her Mercury there's her Mercury at 5 degrees 36 Leo. So again, she's got her Mercury close to the degrees of Charles and Camilla's ascendant. Again, it says Mercury and Saturn as hitting her Mercury. So she's not a happy camper. She's feeling a bit low about things, I would have said, and that might be how she experiences Saturn hitting her Mercury. And finally, there's Volodymyr Zelensky. I just can't avoid Volodymyr Zelensky, can I? Volodymyr Zelensky. So Volodymyr Zelensky, chart I've looked at very recently, but one thing I didn't notice that I sort of missed with Volodymyr Zelensky is his sun. So, let's think about Volodymyr Zelensky's sun at 5 degrees 7 Aquarius, and what actually is going on here. So Saturn is making a semi-square to his sun, a very exact semi-square to his sun, but it's more than that. He is in a very dangerous position, Volodymyr Zelensky. Remember that. If anything bad happens to him, it won't happen because of Russians, by the way. It will happen because, almost certainly will happen because of his political opponents in Ukraine. And if we were to do a bi-wheel, and we were to put Zelensky's chart in the middle, but we were to use a 90-degree dial, just to show you my point here. So here is, if we look at Zelensky's sun, you see there's Zelensky's sun, and we'll put I know it's a rather complicated dial because we've got so many planets here, but we're putting everything on. So there's Zelensky's sun. So you can see that Mercury and Saturn are both making a semi-square to his sun. So that puts Zelensky under a lot of pressure anyway. I mean, he feels a bit depressed. I know that there's just been this meeting. All these European heads of state are going to Kiev because to commemorate the 3rd anniversary of Russia's invasion, and so that might be nice. But Saturn and Mercury are opposition his sun, but it's more than that. Saturn, it's not just Mercury and Saturn are opposition his sun. The Mars-Uranus midpoint is opposition his sun. So that whole configuration in the sky today, Mercury and Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, is directly hitting his sun. And so this could be a very difficult and dangerous time for Zelensky, and I don't think it's happy. I would not see this as being great, and this is just another reminder of how vulnerable he is, and one wonders what's he going to do. I mean, logical thing for him is just to leave, just to resign. But I think he said he'd promised to resign if Ukraine was allowed to join NATO, which is of course ridiculous. Anyway, that's Zelensky's chart. Of all the people I've looked at, I would have said that Zelensky certainly hit very hard by it. If you're in France, Jordan Bardella, as it coincides with his Saturn return, and don't forget Charles and Camilla. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would of course be extremely grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.